Before I sit down, I thought I'd make some remarks. First, thanks, Chad. And one observation I'll make, our president of the Economic Alliance, Chad Burke, takes events like this extraordinarily seriously and dedicates with his team an extraordinary amount of effort to be able to kind of pull off an event as seamlessly as he does. And that standard of care applies to speakers, panel moderators, guests, honorees. And I thought I'd share a little story. Just prior to coming up on stage, Chad pulled me aside in the green room and said, you know, Ted, as a panel moderator, it's probably not likely that many people in the audience will actually listen to much of what you say. So he continued with his advice and said, for that reason, it's probably not necessary for you to be especially witty or charming or even intelligent. So just be yourself. So I'm going to try very hard just to be myself. I am delighted to be here this afternoon. We have a who's who of CEOs on our panel, and rather than butcher their introductions myself, I'll ask each in turn to introduce themselves. Chris, would you mind starting?
Good afternoon, Chris Jahn, American Chemistry Council. I'm one of those swamp creatures in DC that you hear President Trump talk about. So I worked for a congressman and a senator for about 10 years on the Hill, and I've been running trade associations in the chemical space for over 20 years now. Have focused on environmental health, safety, security, and transportation issues throughout my 30-plus year career. Thrilled to represent our members in Washington, globally all across the world, state and local government as well. You know, anywhere there's a public policy issue, ACC is there to play on that issue. So thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. So Alastair Port, I'm the executive president in Indorama that looks after Indovinya. That's the downstream arm of Indorama. So if you think about Indorama, it's one of the major chemical companies in the world. It's got 26,000 people right across the whole of the continents of the world. In the Texas, we've actually got 7 facilities. We've got everything from the big Port Neches chemical integrated chemical plant, all the way through a PET recycling plant in Dallas. Relevant to here is our headquarters are in the Woodlands, just up the road. We have a world-class innovation center also in the Woodlands, and right here in Texas, in Pasadena, we have the state-of-the-art downstream plant that we built a few years ago, and very happy to be in this region. For myself, I'm a chemical engineer, been with the industry all my career. Very excited every day to be part of this industry. I've obviously spent some time in Europe, as you can tell from the accent. It's not East Texas, it's not Australian, it's UK. And I've spent 3 years in South Africa, 6 years in the Middle East, and now been in my adopted home of Texas for the last 11 years. It's good to see you all.
Maybe to start, I'm an Aggie, so I don't know if you caught that. Great. So Adam Peters, I am CEO for Air Liquide North America, based here in Houston. Have spent most of my life in Texas, about 15 years in Houston. Been with Air Liquide my whole career. So much like Rick Campo, a lot of time in Houston area, 29 years with Air Liquide. For those of you that don't know Air Liquide, we are a global industrial gas company. Industrial gases, main products include oxygen, nitrogen, which are both super critical to the chemical industry, as well as hydrogen. And hydrogen is certainly a topic of interest for us for the past couple of years. We've got about 20,000 employees in the US, 60,000 globally, and it's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks, everyone. As many in the audience, certainly appreciate as well as I do, the chemical industry represents a crucial part of the economy in the greater Houston area, as well as in Texas and Louisiana. To begin, I thought it might be useful to ask our panel members to zoom out a bit and instead describe some of the national and international trends, impacts, and activities going on associated with our industry. Chris, given your role as leader of our industry's premier trade association, I think it might be useful to start with you.
Sure. So let me just talk a little bit about the impact that our industry has and hopefully maybe set the table for our members here. So our industry supports over 500,000 jobs directly in the chemical industry. Supports another 4 million jobs in addition to that, responsible for nearly 25% of U.S. GDP. The reason for that is that we are at the beginning of the manufacturing supply chain. So everything, the chair you're sitting in, the phone that you're using, the screen behind me, all that all starts with chemistry. And our members play a hand and a role in all of that. So, we're vital to everything that happens as far as the manufacturing economy go, and we're really proud of what we do for you all in that regard. We think about innovation, and folks don't normally think of our industry when it comes to innovation, but you think about what's going on in the world right now with AI and data centers, for example. Again, you can't do any of that without us. So innovation starts with our industry. And then the last thing I want to say in terms of impact is in regards to our industry's performance. So all of our members have to comply with a program, they're required to do it as a condition of membership, called Responsible Care. And that's a third-party audited program that looks at our members' environmental, health, safety, and security performance. We collect metrics on that performance from our members on an anonymized basis, and then we publicly disclose that on our website and to the world. And so that allows me to legitimately tell you, tell folks in Washington, tell folks at the UN, that our industry has never been cleaner or safer than it is today. We have made huge strides, as I like to say. We're not your grandfather's chemical industry, and it's only getting better, and we're going to continue to improve, leveraging the new tools and talent that we have at our disposal. So that's just a tiny little snapshot of the impact we have in the entire economy.
Thanks, Chris. Adam, I think it might be useful for the audience to understand kind of your perspective on this, and would you mind describing some of those impacts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the chemical industry is one of the main industries that Air Liquide serves. And obviously the ship channel, the Texas Gulf Coast and the like is a huge component of that. Alastair is a big customer of ours, as an example. And it's a big job creator, it's a big investor in terms of industry and business impact, and a main driver for what we see in the U.S. economy. I think when I look at the American Chemistry Council and I think about the slogan, chemistry creates, America competes, I think it's absolutely true and absolutely critical for economic growth in the U.S. And making sure that we maintain a strong leadership position going forward. Air Liquide is a central player to that in terms of a key gas supplier to that industry, and one that we see just really just an important sector that we want to continue to support. There's key challenges to that. Overcapacity build-out is a big challenge in this space, and this is one that we need to watch closely, and this is why I think the chemical industry in general needs to stay competitive to be able to make sure it's vibrant for the decades to come.
Thanks, Adam. I failed to adequately introduce myself. Let me pause for a second and do that. My name's Ted Grabowski. I'm Chief Executive Officer of a small privately held company called Texas Brine Company, and we solution mine underground salt formations in the U.S., which is the raw material to manufacture chlorine. In addition, we store an awful lot of natural gas, crude oil, and natural gas liquids in the underground caverns that we subsequently create. And beyond that short commercial, there is a point I'm making, and that is when you think about the raw material that it takes to fuel the chemical industry, which fuels our economy, virtually all the raw materials come from the earth. It's either in the form of crude oil, natural gas liquids, minerals like potassium, minerals like sodium, and the reality is it's such an integrated, homegrown kind of supply chain that it has a very robust and dramatic footprint throughout the country, not just in the Houston area. With that introduction, let me continue to move on. Clearly, one of the most important impacts associated with our industry, because we do have a big footprint, is the capital investment that our member companies make that affect not just their local or their state, but actually their regional and national communities. And Alastair and Adam specifically, given the fact that you're in charge of making decisions regarding how to deploy capital, I think it might be interesting for the audience to understand at least some of the criteria that we use to do so. Alastair, may I suggest we begin with you?
Sure. So, are we working again? Hello? Hello? Yep, it's back again. Okay, so I would suggest most people in this room are business people of some form or other, whether it's a chemical business or a support business or a publication business. You all make the right decisions based on the right criteria. So where does money come from? We either generate it within the business or we borrow it. That's capitalism at its finest. So when we think about an investment decision, we don't just use capital for greenfield sites. So Pasadena is a great example of a greenfield site because we found a gap in the market, we thought we could exploit it and build some business, and it's working very well. But capital can also go into brownfield sites, and it can go into product line extensions, and it can go into debottlenecking, and it can go into acquisitions. And I think if you look at the $3.5 billion we've invested in Texas over the last few years, what have we done? We've done all of those things. We've acquired, we've done brownfield sites, we've done greenfield sites, and we've done debottlenecking, and we've upgraded facilities to world-class facilities. So think about capital not just as, is there a new plant coming? It's, Port Neches is 78 years old. I want it to be there in 150 years. You know, we want to keep upgrading our facilities and keep making them meaningful and world-class. So think about it from that point of view. So the considerations are, is there a business? Is there a market here? The best place to put a chemical plant, I'll tell you, is where the market is. I know we've done a history and I've been in the Middle East, and you place it where there's cheap oil, cheap gas, cheap raw materials. You get into supply chain issues every time. So being where the market is as your base load is a great position to start. Those accesses to raw materials and energy is so paramount to the chemical industry. I think support networks, and I see a lot of them in the room today, if you don't have a support network of people who can maintain plants or help build plants or expand plants, you're not going to get them in the middle of France. You need them here. And then what else? People. I heard a lot of conversation about people. If you don't have a world-class workforce readily available, you can't make chemicals, you can't innovate, you can't grow, and you can't be world-class reliability. It doesn't work. And then what else would I say? A regulatory framework. I think we talked about keeping everybody safe, keeping the environment safe, making us more sustainable, not having any PSM issues, and having a regulatory framework that sort of allows you to build quickly, be agile, bring new products to the market, get permits to expand. That's absolutely critical. And one that many people don't talk about is IP protection. You need IP protection. A lot of the stuff we make and build is confidential. So you need to be in a region that protects you. So if I think about Pasadena in this area, what do I see? I see markets. It's great. I see ability to export some of our products. That's great. It's got a great port. I see a great workforce, without a doubt, world class. I see access to raw materials. I see access to energy. Great. Where can we improve is a good question. I think regulations could be a little bit less complex and a little bit more competitive, I think would be one place to start. I think an active bringing through the workforce. People are getting older, people are retiring. We need that young people coming through and filling our plants. And they need to be more than just enough. It needs to be expanding rapidly. I think one thing to think about is cost of build. The US used to be one of the cheapest places in the world to build because of your productivity and your access to materials and your speed of doing things. China is now 60% of the cost of the US. You've got to think about that. If you want to attract new businesses, new products, new plants, you've got to be competitive in the build cost. And therefore, there's a challenge out there for all the consultants and contractors in the room. How do we get competitive? How do we take out middlemen? How do we just use AI, digital, whatever we need to do to speed up that supply chain? So I think there's a real opportunity ahead of us.
Very good. Thank you, Alastair. Adam, would you mind?
Yeah, maybe just to add a few things, Alastair, I think you summarized it very well. If I think about what's going to be required to kind of boost the U.S. economy and drive further investment here in particular, I think there's three things that are going to be needed. One of them is regulatory certainty, regulatory improvement to help foster that. I think there's been some improvement made, and certainly that'll continue, I believe. I think tariff certainty is going to be important, making sure that we have clarity around costs and the like, and I think once we get more clarity around the tariff side, that will help companies like my own, to really drive this forward and make those investment decisions we need. And then I think we saw a sign of interest rates falling yesterday. I think seeing a little bit more of that will help that as well. I think these three things will start to see the boost that we would like to see in the economy, and certainly here in particular. I think Alastair summarized many other aspects extremely well.
Well, thanks, Adam. I think your mention of tariffs is a great segue into an area that I think many in the audience would find interesting. We've obviously all seen a lot of significant policy changes associated with our current administration, and a lot of those policy changes revolve around the whole issue of tariffs. Thought occurs to me, Chris, that given your role as leader of our industry trade association, I know you and your staff have worked hard that waterfront. Would you share your perspective on it?
So many thoughts on tariffs and trade. So again, you got to take this with, I'm the guy in DC, dealing with these things on a daily basis. On average, the administration has come out with a new trade policy every 3 days, right? So if you're investing in 30, 40, 50-year assets, that can be a challenging environment in which to operate. Now, having said that, look, and Adam, you mentioned global oversupply driven, largely by China, but certainly others as well. There are a number of countries in the world have engaged unfair trade practices for quite a long time. President Trump believes in his core that we should address that, and he is aggressively pursuing that agenda. We appreciate that. We appreciate trying to hold other countries accountable for their behavior. That is net a positive thing. Having said that, at the same time, here in the United States, we have a $30 billion trade surplus in chemicals. We have a $20 billion trade surplus in plastics. We do not want to be collateral damage in a trade war with everybody across the world, right? So this has to be a nuanced strategic approach going forward to make sure that we don't get harmed in the back and forth that takes place here. I will say there have been some unintended consequences to some of the policies that have been put in place. So we've met with the trade representative, we've met with the White House, we've met with Commerce, and we've been able to address a number of those issues. Just recently, as less than 2 weeks ago, they fixed some of the challenges that some of our members were having. You haven't seen a single press release from us on that. We haven't been public about that. It's very much an inside the beltway, inside baseball type of game that we're playing in regards to getting some of those things resolved. But I think, for all those of you who are looking for that certainty on trade, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I don't think, or I know that that's on a bipartisan basis, both Republicans and Democrats. This is one of the few things they agree on. I think we should continue to anticipate uncertainty in the trade space for a while going forward.
Well, thanks, Chris. That's a wonderful view from kind of a national level. Again, I'll suggest we zoom down a little bit, and Adam, perhaps start with you. Given your company's international footprint, I'm certain you've had to deal with supply chain issues and tariffs. Could you share some insights with the audience in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I just realized I have 2 microphones. Sorry. But, one of the things that we've tried to do, so if I look at tariffs, largely what we do is we build local for local consumption. So we largely don't have huge direct tariff impacts other than when we build something, when we invest and the like. What we try to do is we try to look internationally at multiple sources for items coming in, that if they're going to be imported, so that we can make the lowest cost decision in terms of that. The biggest impact that we've seen globally with regards to tariffs, and certainly the impact in the U.S., is the indirect impact. So the indirect impact really driving a slowdown in volumes, an uncertainty which is a little bit disconcerting in terms of where things are going to go. And that to us has been the biggest impact, and one where, maybe to Chris's point, while it may not come very soon in terms of certainty, sure hope it comes somewhat soon.
No doubt, no doubt. Even a small company like ours, we end up indirectly getting affected by tariffs. our book of business going forward looks like almost $1 billion of spending in the next 3 years for a tiny company like ours. A lot of that is essentially steel, whether it's drilling wells, building facilities, building pipelines, and oh my goodness gracious, we are scrambling in terms of, if anybody has any pipe on the ground, please give me your business card before you leave, because we are scrambling for it. Alastair, you too have an enormous international footprint. Do you have any words of wisdom you can share with us?
Words of wisdom, I don't know, but words of observation. I'm an Englishman, so we put tariffs onto tea into the US, and look what happened there. So we were built not to have tariffs, really. It's not normally a good outcome. But what are tariffs there for today? And it's a little bit of, I know it's uncertain and it's moving around. It is trying to create a little bit of a level playing field. And like I say, I'm not in favor of tariffs. I think it makes countries lazy. I think you can hide behind tariffs and say you don't have to be world class because I'm protected. I think that's a wrong mentality for any industry, personally. And I think that's the downside of tariffs. The upside of tariffs is it protects jobs, it protects industry, it protects economies, and it protects technologies. And here's the dichotomy I think we're all trying to understand is, if you don't put tariffs on today for the chemical industry, it will be destroyed. We are seeing it all over the world. Anybody that's not protecting themselves are getting pummeled, and the industry is getting destroyed. And I think you're going to see a view around the world starting to emerge that local for local is great. 90% of our products are made and sourced locally. But the products that come in are taxed. And some of the products that we compete with are not taxed. And that's not good for manufacturing. So there's a few wrinkles that need to be ironed out to fully protect the industry. I think you'll end up with a system where countries that don't have a chemical industry or an industry they want to protect will not have tariffs. And countries that will have an industry that they need to protect will have tariffs. And it's an awful way of looking at it, but I think certainly in the short, medium term, that's the way it's going to go. Maybe long term, they all disappear again, but it's becoming an industry of local for local.
I'm going to try to weave some questions in from the audience as we go through, and fair warning to the panel members, I'm doing it right now. One of the questions from the audience, which I think is wonderful, is Chris referenced as part of his remarks, the innovation that's associated with the chemical industry that's frequently invisible. And I thought it might be useful to ask Adam and Alastair, and I'll start with an answer of, the question basically revolves around, can you give us an example of an innovation that you're working on currently? And to give Adam and Alastair an opportunity to vamp on it, let me respond first on behalf of our little company. Just a couple of years ago, our little company, we're in the mining business, remember? We commissioned, with the help of several customers, the single most extensive seismic survey ever conducted in the world to locate salt, to locate the contours of a salt deposit we mine and want to continue mining. And although that sounds very foreign and very different than the technology and innovation associated with the chemical industry, since our customers are chemical companies, they enjoy the benefit of that innovation, because if we can mine more efficiently, if we can ensure that deposit exists before you drill a well, the fact is you can be much more effective and efficient. So one observation I'll make in anticipation in Adam and Alastair's answer is that innovation really matters, not just in the heart of our industry, but also all the service and suppliers that contribute to that industry, and all the infrastructure companies like pipelines that contribute to that industry. So innovation, I think we need to think of as a capital I, not a little I. It's not just what happens inside the fence line of a chemical plant. It's really what happens in the whole supply chain that surrounds that chemical plant as well. So with that introduction, hopefully that was enough time for you to prepare. Alastair, I think I'll suggest I'll start with you.
I was going to wait for okay, so I read an interesting comment just the other day and it was from an investment bank, that there's been no innovation in the chemical industry since 1960. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. But that's perception. So if I think about the innovations just in the last few years that I've seen, and some that are coming up, you know, we're heavy into home care, personal care. I mean, what are you seeing? You're seeing the world move from powders and big bottles of detergent into pods. I mean, that's whole chemical industry innovation that allowed you to do that. And, you know, as a humble man, I like to put a pod in instead of trying to measure all things out. That's an innovation, and it makes a difference. And I'll tell you why it makes a difference. It's because you can run machines colder. You don't have to put hot water in, so it saves you electricity, it saves the grid electricity, it saves carbon emissions. People don't remember that that's actually happened, and now it's a way of life. You know, I don't think people are going back. So there's something there. There's something around protection of food, around how you disperse herbicides and insecticides. Herbicides and insecticides, they're not giving up on life. They are aggressive. They fight back all of the time. And you've got to continually innovate the food chain to make sure people get fed. And if you think going forward, in the next few decades, we'll need as much food in the next few decades as the whole of history of mankind. That is reality. So anybody who thinks nobody's inventing anything in the food chain is nonsense as well. I think that whole industry is starting to change as well, because now they're looking at microbes causing, adding fertilizer into the crops. And that's going to be less ammonia, but more of something else. So the industry is constantly inventing itself. Just look at these bottles. Who remembers these bottles when you couldn't do that? And now they're so thin, you can squeeze them and they're easy to recycle. The industry is continually investing in itself, and recognize that. You're part of a major movement of change that's happening all of the time.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Adam, would you mind?
Yeah, maybe I'll build on that a little bit. So innovation is a huge part of our DNA as a company. Maybe I'll take the angle of hydrogen, talk a little bit about hydrogen. So we've been in the hydrogen business for 60 years. It's a big piece of what we do in terms of the value chain, driving innovation in the whole value chain of hydrogen. If you think about what's happening right here in the Texas Gulf Coast, helping to decarbonize the chemical industry for use in products that are going to be appealing in the future. Hydrogen plays a huge role in that in terms of refueling and the like. So in terms of carbon capture, in terms of production of hydrogen itself, the oxygen needs to do that are all really important aspects of that value chain that we're a part of, and I think we'll drive this forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, if I could just jump in real quick, just at an industry-wide level, our members invest more than $13 billion a year in R&D alone. So to your point about, you know, innovation and the investments we're making. And so on Tuesday, I was up on the Hill with a number of our CEOs, talking to leadership on the House and Senate, as well as the EPA. And one of our member companies has invented a new technology, and I talked about AI before. So it's a cooling technology where you actually take the server itself and put it in that coolant. No water use whatsoever, 40% reduction in electricity use. For these high-end, run super hot, you actually need this kind of technology to enable the data center, which enables the AI. So this idea that we're not innovating is complete BS. Yeah. So we could do this all day. There's just so many examples of that. And that's why I'm so excited to represent the industry.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a number of questions come in, you know, that talk about the competitiveness of, you know, the U.S. chemical industry in particular. And again, because we have two CEOs that have companies with international footprints, you know, I think, you know, one way to summarize the questions that have come in really revolve around your views of the U.S. competitiveness from an international standpoint, whether it's Europe, the Middle East, the Far East. Alastair, would you mind if you began there?
Yes, so I spend a lot of my time traveling globally, and you can see the competitiveness in the different regions. And they've all got different pros and cons of why they're there, what they're good at, and the challenges that maybe they've had. And I'll make one observation that was an eye-opener for me, that Europe went through a major change when Ukraine-Russia war, prices went shooting up, they couldn't compete. The amount of re-engineering they've done in Europe is impressive, and the US is behind. And I think sometimes it takes a jolt to the system to get people thinking and moving fast. Sometimes it needs that jolt, and I think Europe had it. Now, I'm not saying they can survive what's going on, but they'll adapt. And I think that's the nature of adaptation, to stay competitive. If I think about my visit last year to China, I mean, I've been visiting China a lot over the years, and they are good at what they do. You know, don't think they're not good. They've got good people running their plants. They've got good plants. They're all fully integrated. They're all very cost competitive, and they were all built cheaply. And it was built for China, but China's economy isn't the greatest economy, so it's coming overseas. If you're a business person and you've got cheap product, you're going to send it wherever you can make money. I mean, that's what happens. So that's what we do in the US. It's there to stay. It's not going to be a flash in the pan. It's there to stay. And they're going to have this anti-involution. We'll see what happens. They're going to shut down some older plants. We'll see what happens. But these world-scale plants are there to stay, and that's what you need to compete with. And that competition is here to stay. So innovation, being better than anyone else at what you do, keeping the integration over here, getting the cheap gas, cheap electricity, keeping that supply and the reliability, world-class at everything you do, you'll compete with everybody. This is the major chemical hub here.
Although Alastair's a tough act to follow, Adam, do you have anything you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, if I think of some of the strong bones that make this region so great, you have low cost energy availability, you have great ecosystem, great talent, competency, and the like, a lot of investment opportunity, access to markets. So I think those are great bones to build upon, but constantly reinventing ourselves, thinking about that competitiveness piece that Alastair talks about is going to be key to making it go forward. When I look at us globally, so we're in 60 countries, we have a lion's share of our investment coming to the US. So the reason why is because of what we believe to be a strong investment landscape going forward for the reasons that I mentioned. So we want to see that happen. We need to see a few things come together in terms of certainty and the like to drive that. But the U.S. has great bones. This region in particular has great bones to keep going. I want to thank you for the important partners that you are in the ecosystem that you help make in terms of this ecosystem being so strong.
Well, very good. And as if the tariff and international competitive landscape isn't enough to worry about, we've also seen a lot of press and analysis regarding policy changes beyond tariffs, not just nationally, but certainly in state houses across the country. And Chris, I know a prominent part of your staff tracks those things on behalf of members. I think the audience members might find it interesting for you to share your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I think it dovetails really well on the conversation we just had in the last question. So 3 quick things I would just say: tax policy, environmental policy, transportation policy. If we could get regulatory certainty on all of those, it allows us to compete more effectively globally. So the tax bill has already been done. So Congress, for all that we all complain about Congress, actually did a really nice job here. Long-term certainty on that, made a lot of the changes from 2017 permanent, so kept the corporate tax rate, R&D tax credit, immediate expensing, really important things for capital-intensive companies like ours. Environmental policy, we're putting science back in the environmental policy process, so whether it's chemicals, air, water, we're going in the right direction there. And then transportation policy, for those of you not aware, there's a big rail merger pending out there, Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. There may be different opinions in the room, but I will tell you from the chemical industry point of view, that is not a good deal. 4 railroads control 90% of the rail traffic in this country. We're going to go to 1 railroad that controls almost 50% of it. That's going to force the other ones to merge, and we're going to have 2 railroads in this country. That's not good for any of us, so we're leading the charge on pushing back on that.
Great. Adam, would you mind?
Let's see. In terms of what? Just building on what Chris was...
Yeah, the changing regulatory landscape in the country, particularly how it changes state to state versus national.
Yeah, if I look at, so kind of building off the One Big Beautiful Bill, from a business standpoint, I'm quite pleased with where that ended up. I think it's the outcome in terms of clarity on regulations like 45V, which is a hydrogen production tax credit, super important for us, super important to move things forward. in terms of 45Q, which is a carbon sequestration and utilization, basically putting that on an equal playing field. The tax policy that Chris mentioned, I think is all very good. So I think it gives that certainty. So I mentioned the three big pieces that I'd like to see certainty on. In my mind, from a regulatory standpoint, I think a lot of that has been framed up. Now we got to see things move forward in terms of permitting reform and the like, but I think that, to me, I feel pretty good about where that's ended up as of July 4th.
Well, so far, 2 out of 3 of our panel members have delivered a more optimistic answer on the regulatory question than I expected. Alastair, can we make it a clean sweep and wrap up?
I would say work in progress. You know, what attracts industry to a country? The country opens its discussion around one-stop shops. Saudi used to have a one-stop shop. You go to one place, you sort everything out. You come here, you've got to deal with a lot of different red tape and industries and things like that. A one-stop shop would be great for industry. Just talk to one set of people about what you're trying to do and let them help us figure it out. That would be one improvement. Science-based, I think Chris mentioned it. We're a science-based industry. As soon as you stop using science and use arguments that aren't based on science, everybody loses their way. Because we don't know how to do it. The other side doesn't know what to even say, and then you end up with regulations nobody knows what to do with. And this industry's got such a huge track record. Chris mentioned it about improvement, continuous improvement, best ever years of safety and environmental releases and things like that. We know what our responsibility is, and we need people on the other side of the table that talk to us, and talk to us on science-based. And then we'll meet in the middle, always. It's always a discussion. And when you stop doing that, the whole thing falls apart. So I think we've moved on. I think it's work in progress, and let's
We're 3 for 3 with the optimistic outlook to finish. Please join with me and thank our panel members.